On this special edition of Independent Sources, New York City incarcerated, the effort to end New York State's practice of trying minors as adults, and new legislation that's making it easier for former felons to find jobs. Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Gary Pierre. New York is one of two states, the other being North Carolina, that continues to try minors as adults. Many of these minors have committed violent crimes and are being caught up in the dragnet of the government's tough on crime mentality, rather than being provided with the rehabilitation they may need to assimilate back into society. I sat down with Eli Hager, a staff writer for the criminal justice reporting website, The Marshall Project, and Charles Nunez, a community advocate for Youth Represent. Youth Represent is a nonprofit organization that's promoting a campaign called Raise the Age. They spoke about the effort to do just that and get these young offenders the help they need. Eli, what's the nature of the crime being committed by juveniles?
Well, in the state of New York, it's actually all crimes. For 16 and 17-year-olds, all crimes get a youth sent to adult court. Only New York and North Carolina is that true. You also have 13, 14, and 15-year-olds who can be sent to adult court for 17 felonies, ranging from murder to burglary. 13-year-olds, it's only murder. But for 16 and 17-year-olds, it's all crimes. And what you see is particularly impulsive crimes, since the adolescent brain isn't fully developed. You see a lot of impulsive, split-second types of decisions.
Okay. And Charles, you have been working on this issue for quite some time now. Give us a sense of the crime that some of these young people are committing, and you yourself had some personal examples that you went through the system, and you could share that with us as well. I'd like that.
Yes, no, most definitely. So first, I'd like to state that, like, in New York State, given that once you're 16, you're automatically sentenced as an adult. So that's, as Eli said, and only in New York State and as well as North Carolina. And the crimes, yes, they do vary from, it could be like a heinous crime, but usually, to be honest, when you look at the statistics, only 75% of these crimes, 75% of these crimes are misdemeanors that 16 to 17-year-olds commit. So we need to look at that factor and then also at what is the other situations that's going on. So there are more heinous crimes that happen, but we need to be able to address all those situations as children and kids.
I understand that 7-year-olds as well sometimes can be charged as adults?
Yes, so it could be as well as, well, not 7-year-olds will be charged as adults. Actually, let me take that back. But they could be they could go into the criminal justice system. They'll be going to the juvenile justice system. But at the end of the day, that's at 7 years old. You shouldn't be going into a facility for that. You should be getting rehabilitative services and programs for whatever given situation that happened.
Talk to us about your personal experience with the system.
Yeah, no, I would definitely get into that, because it's like, that's, given my personal experience with the criminal justice system is what influenced me to do the work I do now. I'm now a community advocate at Youth Represent. Youth Represent is a nonprofit law firm, and we provide direct re-entry legal services to youth 24 and under. And my passion for it started from my personal experience with the criminal justice system. At the age of 17, I was charged with a violent felony, and I spent 6 months up to 6 months. It was between 5 and 6 months at Rikers Island, and that was something like one of the most toughest times of my life, experiencing the violence in there from like the correctional officers to also fighting literally almost every day for a 3-week span with other people being held in Rikers. So, given what I experienced at Rikers, that was just like, it's no other 16, 17, other child should experience that sort of violence. But what makes it worse is that, and what really invokes me to really get on board with what's going on with the social change for this criminal justice efforts, is the fact of the collateral damages that happen once you encounter the criminal justice system. Once I was released from Rikers Island, that was the happiest day of my life.
I'm sure.
Yes, and it was like, oh yes, nothing could go wrong now. Like it's like I'm released. But to be honest, that's when the real trouble started. And I say that because after being released, my family was then public housing then started eviction proceedings against my family. And this all stemmed from my arrest.
And you said violent felony. What was it?
I don't want to get into like the specifics of the crime because it's sealed.
Okay, I got you.
So given that it's sealed, I'd rather not get into it. But just the fact that it's considering that, and I make sure to mention violent felony because that's what you hear that, oh, we can't let violent felons get second chances. We need to make sure that they're going into the criminal justice system. But no, these, like once you're 16, you're still a kid. You need to be able to get the chances to rehabilitation. So.
And Eli, let's follow up on Charles' point. I mean, is this helping with recidivism? Is it curbing it? Or is this really a way for people like Charles to get their first sort of entree into the hard criminal life?
Right. Sending juveniles to adult court does not help with recidivism. You see, I think about 80% of juveniles who end up in adult prisons go on to reoffend, and that's in large part because they are exposed to violence while inside. They're more likely to be abused by guards. They're more likely to have sexual relationships with guards or other prisoners. They're more likely to get in fights, and they're more likely to experience solitary confinement, which is hugely detrimental to the adolescent brain's development. And the Campaign for Youth Justice has also done research suggesting that they're, I think, 35 times more likely to commit suicide in adult facilities than they are in youth facilities. So all of these things compound, and they end up learning how to be a criminal as opposed to learning how not to be a criminal while they're in there. And so the recidivism rates for juveniles who go to adult court are much, much higher. So it's not a solution to recidivism to send them there.
And I would like to elaborate on that as well. And it's the fact, and that's also why we need to bring in New York State, why we need to bring 16 and 17-year-olds into the family court system, into the juvenile justice system, because that's where they get more of those rehabilitative services. They get more sort of like counseling and get therapy. They get alternative to incarceration programs. If housing support is needed, they get those services, and those services are not really available at the adults in the adult criminal justice system. So we need to make sure that we get our 16 and 17-year-olds in a better, out of one, to not have to encounter all that violence that Eli just elaborated on, from like the sexual assaults to the violence. We need to make sure that they don't experience that, but that's just not enough. Just like taking our 16 and 17-year-olds out of those prisons and out of the adult prisons and adult jails is not enough. We need to attack the collateral damages that spike from that as well.
Now, there's been an attempt to get New York State legislature to pass this bill. So why is it taking them so long to change the law?
Well, one thing I think we have to understand is that the fear of crime and the fear of juvenile crime is only beginning to wane. I mean, it was at a real peak in the late 80s and 90s with the fear of the juvenile super predators, people like Willie Basquiat, who was a young person who killed a number of people on the New York City subways. That really peaked in the 90s, but it didn't really wane after that for quite a while. And we're only now seeing, with this national movement for criminal justice reform, we're only now seeing kind of a little bit less of that fear. So it took us a while to get out from that fear. And then I think you also just have to understand that 16 and 17-year-olds have been left out of the family court system for 200 years in New York State. So it takes a lot to overturn that type of legacy. And you have a lot of upstate Republicans who are opposed to efforts to be softer on crime. And you also have liberals who think that simply raising the age doesn't do enough, and that there should be more included in any potential legislation. So there have been obstacles on both sides to overturning something that's been around for so long.
So what are the alternatives?
I say we shouldn't go for an alternative. We should address this matter head on, which is getting 16 to 17-year-olds out of the jails and prison system, and just basically raising the age of criminal responsibility up to 18. And this is because of like the several things we already talked about. And it's a matter of we're also getting this movement now. Like last year, we were pretty close to to getting progress on getting the bill passed on raising the age. We had several support from the governor. The governor backed it. We had different people from New York State backing it, from district attorney's office to even probation commissioners. So there's definitely support for raising the age. And I think this year around is just a matter of being able to touch base with the Republican senators and seeing what exactly is stopping them from going through. But I think there's hope on making this now. We're not going for an alternative, but attacking it head on.
Okay.
In terms of what to replace, once you have 16 and 17-year-olds who are no longer in the adult system, I think some of the things that have been shown to work, particularly since juvenile adolescent brains are kind of more malleable and they're open to rehabilitation more than kind of these fixed adult brains. Some of the things that have seemingly been working have been the kind of family-based or community-based alternatives where you kind of activate the influencers in the young person's life to kind of use them as part of the solution. And also things like allowing police to direct young people to social services instead of directing them into the criminal justice system, and also, you know, working on the school system and the other social services, child welfare systems to make sure that you're identifying problems early and supporting kids before they commit crimes.
Sure. So what's the racial breakup of these youngsters we're talking about?
The racial disparities actually increase as you go through the system. So you see, I think 70% of the juveniles charged as adults are Black or Latino. You see that go up to 80% for the juveniles who are sent to adult facilities. So what you see is at every step during the process, the disparities get worse and worse because there's, you know, racial discrimination and other factors that kind of enhance these disparities at every step along the way, even though particularly among juveniles, crime rates are actually fairly even between races.
What is it going to take to get some kind of resolution to this problem we've been discussing?
I think it's really the time is now, and I think we're getting also momentum from like President Obama. He's addressed a lot of reentry issues. This past October, he had youth justice as a proclamation. So given a lot of the attention that the criminal justice system is getting right now, we need to make sure that we push these legislators to pass the bill now and addressing it not trying to get a negotiation and settle for something to just taking 16 and 17-year-olds out of state prisons and state jails. It's a matter of doing it correctly so that our youth could have fulfilling and be productive members of society. You know, because the collateral damages that happen from having a criminal record is a lot of what causes recidivism. It's like if you don't have the opportunity to engage back into society, you leave in that kid, and which eventually becomes an adult with very little options, and they go into the little options that they have, and for most times that's crime.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Charles Nunez, Eli Hager, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
When we come back, new legislation that could have thousands of former felons more gainfully employed. Before that, Crystal Lowe has some other news.
Here's a look at some headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Jackson Heights resident and performing artist Deborah Wasserman has started a campaign to raise awareness about human sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. Voices of New York reports that Jackson Heights is considered the epicenter of human trafficking and sexual exploitation in New York State. Wasserman started her campaign by standing on corners wearing a mask made of paper pieces depicting women's body parts, while passing out cards that read, "No longer your chica." Wasserman's cards are in opposition to the infamous chica cards commonly handed out on Roosevelt Avenue to advertise prostitution. Wasserman, along with other human trafficking advocacy groups and former victims, is gearing up for another No Longer Your Chica campaign this spring. The Manhattan Times reports that La Casa Azul will be closing this month after residing nearly 4 years in East Harlem. Since its opening, the bookstore's offerings have varied. It's held space for the reunion of the 1960s activist group, the Young Lords, featured readings by authors such as Junot Diaz and Sonia Manzana, exhibited the work of national artists, and has donated piles of books to programs such as the Safe Passage Project, which offers legal aid to undocumented immigrant children who enter the U.S. Owner Aurora Anaya Serta announced that she wants to secure a larger space for the bookstore, expanding it into something more influential to accommodate different groups and eventually evolve into a community center. Brooklyn College could have a new Haitian Studies Institute on its campus nearly 2 years after the proposal was put forth. According to Caribbean Life, the university has a large population of Haitian students and faculty. That, in addition to the borough being home to the largest Caribbean population in New York, Haitians in particular, has helped the idea of the Haitian Studies Institute come to fruition. The Haitian Studies Institute will be academically focused and operate as a hub for research. The hope is that the institute will encourage research at the international level, inviting scholars from around the world to meet, discuss, and find support. And finally, as we embark on the winter months, libraries and museums across the city are celebrating New York's most famous beach, Coney Island. The forward highlights several exhibits exploring the history of one of the world's most celebrated tourist destinations. The exhibits are being held at the Brooklyn, Valentine, and Coney Island museums. For more information on these and other exhibits covering the life and death of Coney Island, you can visit the website forward.com. Those are just a few headlines from the city's ethnic and community media. Independent sources will be right back.
Thanks for staying tuned. New York City recently signed a law that would make it illegal for someone to be denied a job because of their criminal records. The legislation is called the Fair Chance Act and bans questions about a person's criminal history on job applications and during interviews. Zyphus LeBrun spoke to Bishop Darren Ferguson and Jasbir Singh of Faith in New York, an interfaith organization that was instrumental in promoting the legislation.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for being in studio with us today.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right, so let's just start talking about this Fair Chance Act. We'll start with you, Bishop. So tell me a little bit about what exactly is this Fair Chance Act?
The Fair Chance Act is taking the box off of job applications that ask people if they've been convicted of a crime before they're even eligible for the interview process. So we've gotten employers in New York City to be able to have to take that off of job applications so that people will at least have a level playing field to get to the interview process without having people biased by the worst thing they've ever done in their lives.
Now, how long has the process been to get to this point of actually getting this act put into law?
It's been a couple years, right?
It's been a lot of years.
Yeah,
I mean, we
right.
started working on this when I was being released from prison 17 years ago.
Right.
So we've been talking about it since then. So to see it now, the whole concept of ban the box comes from, I think, a guy named Jazz Hayden and some other guys who started talking about this 20 years ago. And now it's gotten to the place now where we're actually getting legislation passed.
Now, is this a situation where someone cannot be asked about their criminal history at all under any circumstances, or are there variations to when somebody can be asked about their criminal history?
So as far as them getting into a job interview, if they apply for a job application, that box is taken out that job application. If they get an actual interview, they're not going to be asked that question. If they're being considered for a job, then the employer is allowed and has the means to do a background check after that, if they're considered for that position. But as far as them applying for the job and also being in a job interview, no, they're not going to. They're by law, you're not supposed to be asked that at all.
Now, for instance, if I go, let's say I have criminal history and I go in and I say, and I'm being interviewed, and I'm asked, about my history, and I feel that at the end of the day that them asking me that question has in some way biased. Do I have any kind of recourse under those circumstances to say, hey, listen, I was called into this interview and I feel like I've been treated incorrectly after they found out my history.
I would tell them, call, first of all, since it's been passed through the city council, call your local city councilman and allow people to know, Better Business Bureau, places like that, to make sure that people know that they're asking these questions at the wrong point in the interview process, and let them know that you're being biased against. I mean, if there's an issue with the law at this point, is I don't know how much teeth there are behind the law at this point, but at least we're making, I think this is the first step. This is a drop in the bucket of a lot of things that we have to do about prison reform and making the reentry process for people who are returning to society fair. But it is a first, it's a major first step to get a major city like New York City to say, we're at least gonna do that. But if somebody feels like they're biased against, you have the same recourse that anybody does. If they're racially biased against, sexual, gender, sexual orientation, the same rules apply. Your city council, Better Business Bureau, all of the places that someone else would go, anyone that would go is being discriminated against.
But does the law specifically address that issue if someone feels that in the process that they're biased against?
There are amendments within the Fair Chance Act of New York City that actually concentrates on that. So if you are being discriminated, you can actually file, like it was a racial discrimination situation or any other discrimination, types of discrimination cases that you could actually file to sue or to even get the person arrested, you can actually do that. So there's amendments there that support that. Now, saying how strong those amendments are, it's a new law. So we need to make sure that we grow the teeth, right? We grow the teeth and make sure that people respect that law as much as they respect any other law.
And how can that be done? Is it a matter of putting people's feet to the fire if in that case, if you feel that way?
Addressing the issues, keep on addressing the issues. Even though we got the law passed doesn't mean that everything is all, everything is great now. The law's passed, that's awesome, but now we need to not only implement it within these job applications that need to be taken out, but also implement into the environment of those companies and those corporations so they won't ask those questions and respect the fact that this person is an individual that's applying for the job. And even if you are visually discriminating them because of how they look, you still need to give them a chance into not only interviewing them, but also look into their resume as a person who is qualified and applying for the job.
Now, Bishop, one of the things that you just talked about is this whole idea of reintroducing people who have gone through the jail system, the prison system rather, reintroducing them into the society. How much does this law play into this whole idea of lowering recidivism?
There's a lot of work to be done about recidivism. Again, this is one drop in a huge bucket of work that needs to be done. An important one, but just one drop. I think that in terms of recidivism, there are a lot of factors that go into recidivism rates, right? Where someone lives, the environment they're going into, who they hang around, their education level, all of those things play into it. Employment is one piece, but I think that it's incumbent upon us as society to say to ourselves, we have these folks, I like to use the motif of a landing strip, right? Somebody coming in from prison or jail is landing back into society. Maybe 6 months, 3 months, 6 years, in my case, 8 years and 8 months, 20 years, 30 years after being taken away from society. Things change, people change, ideas change, the way people do things change. So I think it's incumbent upon us as a society that want people to have every opportunity to be successful returning from prison, to pave the landing strip so that people get coming for a successful landing. There's some onus on the person who's getting out of prison. Of course, we expect them not to go back to dangerous behavior, not to go back to drugs and alcohol, not to deal with the people, places, and things that got them incarcerated in the first place. But we have a job to make sure that we at least make it fair, make it possible. And the way things have been over the last couple of years, it's some cases nearly impossible.
Well, how was it for you? I mean, you mentioned your own dealings with
it. It was difficult. I went to prison in 1990, and I came out in 1998. So there was no internet when I went to jail. There was no Metro cards when I went to jail. We were still using tokens. So those were just two things, right? And then on top of it, just the job market had changed. There was so many things that were different when I came out. So it was a combination of my family who loved me, supported me. It was a combination of being able to network with people while I was in prison so that I had a decent network to be able to connect me to possible jobs when I got out. it was also what I did while I was in prison. I went to college in prison. I went into prison with a GED. I came out with the bachelor's equivalent and was ready to study for my master's upon release. So those are things, I did all the work that I could possibly do while I was inside the prison. Went to anti-violence programs, went to any possible program where I felt it could be a benefit to me, to give me more things in my toolbox to use when I got out. And then the love of my family, the support of my friends, and the support of the community was what helped me be successful. And all I want to do, my life's work, part of my life's work, is to provide that same environment for anyone else who's being released from prison.
Do you feel like there is enough of that kind of structure, along with this law, that exists, well, within New York City now to help?
No. I think parole and probation are on the right track in the sense that they're making parole and probation more community involved, as opposed to you going to 40th Street or going up in 161st Street in the Bronx and have to sit in this big place with a bunch of people who have been locked up, you may have been locked up with, to see a parole officer that tells you don't do this, don't do that. They're really integrating it into the community and wanting it to be more community involved, getting churches involved, getting masjids involved, getting the community to understand that we have a responsibility to, A, provide an environment that's fair, and also to hold people accountable. And that means not only the person who went to jail in the first place, but also hold our elected officials, our police departments, hold the probation department, hold society in general. There's a level of accountability that all of us must rise to in order to help this problem get better, to lower recidivism rates. And I think that President Obama and some of the things that have been done about tap and Pell Grants and allowing education back. Education is the one thing across the board that works in terms of lowering recidivism rates. The one thing that works. I mean, the people who leave jail with at least an associate's degree come back to jail at a much lower rate than people who come back with no education. So why would you take the one thing out of prison that works across the board? They did because of fear-mongering that happens in politics. And I think that now people are starting to see, both Republicans and Democrats, that the system that we have is unsustainable.
Right.
Financially, socially, spiritually, any way you think about it, the system we have now is unsustainable. So the only thing we can do is change it. So I think we're starting with some policies, and we're working every day. Jasmine and I and others are working towards the systemic change that's going to make a criminal justice system that's not a justice system that is criminal, right? And not a criminal system that's looking for justice, but an actual criminal justice system where criminals are brought to justice, and then there's a restorative aspect to it to bring them and the victims back to a table to say, this is what needs to happen in order for everybody to be made whole again.
All right. Bishop, thank you very much. Jasper, thanks for being with us. Got to cut it short today, but definitely, more to be dealt with, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
All right.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.